Who knew that collecting fresh spring water, something so natural, so life-giving, could spark a war within a neighborhood? For Brian Cooper, it wasn't just about water. It was about dignity, survival, and the ugly truth buried beneath community rules. When HOA President Karen slapped him with a staggering fine for what she called stockpiling spring water, she didn't just attack his choice, she exposed a pattern of control and hypocrisy. At first, it seemed like Brian was powerless, but beneath the calm surface ran a current stronger than Karen's rules, one that would eventually break its way through like a dam bursting. Brian Cooper had lived in Pinecrest Meadows for 3 years. The neighborhood was postcard perfect, neatly trimmed lawns, pastel-painted homes, and streets lined with identical oak trees. Beneath that illusion of order lay something insidious, an HOA board obsessed with control. At the center of it was Karen, the board's president, a woman whose smile only appeared when she was issuing fines. She claimed their rules protected community standards, but Brian quickly learned they were really weapons to keep people in their place. While most residents toed the line, fearful of citations or shaming emails, Brian found solace in a habit no one could have imagined stirring controversy. He collected spring water. From the nearby hills flowed a crystal-clear stream. For him, it was more than hydration. It was tradition, an echo of his childhood summers when his grandfather taught him how nature could sustain and heal. He stored it in large barrels near his yard, not for show, but for use, drinking, gardening, and sharing quietly with neighbors who trusted him. That trust didn't sit well with Karen. She saw Brian's role, always giving, always connected to nature, as a threat to her structure of power. When she stumbled upon the barrels one evening during her usual rounds, the outrage lit like gasoline. Soon the violation notice came. Brian had been fined for stockpiling spring water in unsightly containers. The fine alone was enough to sting, but what it represented burned even deeper. It wasn't about barrels, it was about erasing him, stripping away simple comforts that tied him to something pure. And for Brian, it became clear this wasn't just one petty squabble. It was a collision course with the system itself. The fine was only the beginning. Weeks passed and Karen's harassment escalated. Each notice piled on Brian's doorstep like a stack of warnings. His lawn too wild, his barrels too primitive, his garden non-compliant. Each phrase seemed chosen with precision, wrapped in language that was polite on the surface, but brimming with judgment underneath. Neighbors whispered about him, not out of agreement with Karen, but in fear. They too had been targeted. Families told to repaint homes multiple times a year. Retirees fined for flower beds deemed non-conforming. Brian noticed a pattern. Those singled out weren't the ones who challenged safety, but the ones who quietly carried traditions or refused to bend completely to the HOA's rigid image of conformity. The most painful moment came one morning when Brian discovered one of his barrels deliberately overturned. Gallons of spring water soaked into the soil, wasted. Karen passed on her morning jog just then, offering a smile that never reached her eyes. It was no accident. It was a message. But Brian didn't resist with immediate rage. He watched, waited, studied. If Karen played by rules backed with paper and signatures, Brian realized nature had its own power. Beneath Pinecrest Meadows, the stream that sustained his water barrels didn't just trickle harmlessly. It snaked its way for miles, carving its path silently through rock and soil. And at one point, hidden beyond the manicured edges of the neighborhood, sat an old dam. Most residents never thought of it, tucked away and forgotten. Brian did. He hiked there often, noticed the cracks along the stone, the water pressing harder against its gates with every rain. To him, the dam symbolized what Karen built with her HOA, a fragile illusion of control, one that could never break nature's forces forever. So he began documenting, not legal papers, but images, small acts of proof, pictures of broken gates, roots straining against concrete, water slipping through fissures. All the while, Karen pushed harder, raising his fines with arrogance, unbothered by the destruction to his peace. Her letters piled higher, his resolve hardened, and beneath it all, the quiet roar of water reminded him no structure of human control lasts when it tries to fight nature itself. The breaking point came one storm-heavy evening. Sheets of rain battered Pinecrest Meadows, soaking the pristine walkways and flooding the manicured lawns. Residents scrambled indoors. Karen still patrolled with her flashlight, gripping her HOA clipboard as though it could shield her from the downpour. And Brian, drenched but steady, made his way to the old dam. The water pounded harder, swelling against the cracked gates. Lightning lit up the sky, each strike revealing the truth he already knew. This barrier could not hold forever. It wasn't vandalism. It wasn't sabotage. It was gravity, pressure, inevitability. With soaked hands, he slipped his camera into a waterproof pouch. He documented the stress lines, the water already seeping through, the rattling tremor of each surge pressing harder. Then, like a final straw snapping, the dam cracked open. Water gushed forth with crushing force, racing downhill into Pinecrest Meadows. Lawns washed away, fences toppled, sidewalks crumbled beneath torrents of natural power. The HOA's proud rules written on all their pristine notices disintegrated in the flood. And there was Karen. She stood frozen on her porch as the water rushed, screaming for order, for rules to hold back the rising tide. But rules, Brian thought, never beat nature. As the water surged around her neatly painted fence, Karen saw the truth. No HOA fine, no threat, could undo the reality that her control had always been brittle, always collapsing upon itself. And Brian didn't watch with vengeance. He watched with clarity. This wasn't revenge. This was letting nature speak, letting the truth rise. The morning after the flood, Pinecrest Meadows looked nothing like the tidy postcard it once was. Streets were littered with branches, lawns stripped bare, homes standing vulnerable without their polished shells. In that mess, something remarkable happened. Neighbors emerged, not as subjects of Karen's rules, but as people, helping each other, passing buckets, clearing debris, sharing. Without Karen's clipboard, they looked freer, as though something had been lifted. Brian's barrels remained safe, filled again by the world that never stopped giving. When neighbors approached, some asked for water, others for seeds. He shared, as he always had. The spring that had once been targeted as unsightly became survival, connection, hope. Karen's power didn't vanish overnight. She still ranted, still sent emails, but something cracked in her grip. After all, when you see that walls of stone and paper can crumble in a single storm, you stop fearing the clipboard. Slowly, resistance grew. The HOA's voice no longer rang as absolute law, but as a reminder of how fragile control can be when it smothers truth. For Brian, the victory wasn't in watching Karen falter. It was in witnessing nature restore balance, in seeing neighbors tap into something older and stronger than bylaws. The spring still flowed, the dam forever broken, and life carried forward. Sometimes the lesson comes not from fighting rules with rules, but from remembering that no man-made structure can forever silence what is real, honest, and natural. So I ask you, what's stronger? Paper rules that try to control, or the unstoppable current of truth that will always find its way through?